in a rugby-driven state, particularly Southeast Queensland, why football? Why AFL?
Well, I think I was born here in Victoria, so
Okay, there we go. There we go.
yeah, I know. There's an element of that coming from a footy mad family, and I moved to Queensland when I was 4 when my dad got a job transfer. So we were your typical Victorian expats. So we moved to Queensland in such a better weather. So that's how my family ended up there. But yeah, I think it was an element of it's just in my blood. So both sides of my family are footy mad, and so it's football is the only thing I've ever really known since I can remember. That's what our weekends were filled with, either going to local footy or watching it on the TV and listening to it on the radio. So it's just part of the family. It's in the blood, and so that's, I guess, how it all started.
Did you have a Victorian team that you took up with you that you had to dispatch once you settled into Queensland life as a young kid?
No, well, I mean, I guess I was pretty young that I was still kind of making up my own mind. So most of my family go for the Melbourne Demons.
Mm-hmm.
So I think if my dad had it his way, I'd be a Demon supporter. But since I kind of grew up, in Brisbane, and so I just kind of went for the local team. And all of my family, Brisbane Lions are their second team.
Yeah.
Apart from me, it is my number one. So yeah, that's I was still pretty fresh when I moved to Brisbane. So the Lions, I was influenced that way.
Fantastic. Now, did you start playing footy at a younger age? How did that evolve, and how did that sort of grow into being in love with the game on a more intimate level outside playing the game?
Yeah, I was sort of a similar story to a lot of women my age. I started playing football with my brothers at local level, and because there was no women's footy available when I was growing up. And so, I played a handful of games here and there. But, when I started to get a bit older, my parents didn't want me to get hurt, which is fair enough. And so stopped playing with the boys. And then there was kind of a little bit of school footy, but it was just kind of mostly mucking around in the playground. And they had a couple of sort of small 9-a-side kind of tournaments that we played in school, but nothing serious. And then when I was in my late teens was when women's footy first started in Brisbane. And so one of our family friends, who you may know, Brianna Brock, her sisters formed the Zimmer Eagles Women's Football Club. And my dad was our first ever coach. And so that's when I started playing women's footy. But pretty soon after that, I had left home to go and start my journalism degree, and then ended up in Darwin. So I played a bit of footy up in Darwin. And then, and so I started playing sort of around then.
And for those who are enjoying this podcast in November, we're right in the infancy of the NTFL season as well. So with all the excitement that's happening up there and the women's competition, it's exploded over the past few years. It's evolving into a beast that's bigger than probably what most people would ever envision it would be. Do you sort of still keep an eye on what's happening up there?
Oh, definitely. Yeah. Still kind of, I'm still friends with a lot of people I've met up there through social media, and, still follow the, all the Facebook pages and all that kind of stuff. So still keep an eye on what's happening. It's such a magical part of the world. And I'm so grateful. I spent 5 years up there working as a sports journalist and playing footy, and some of the best memories of my life. And so if you haven't ever gone up there and experienced it, please do, because the NTFL competition is awesome. And I was lucky enough to go and watch some footy on the Tiwi Islands as well. And it was, like I said, a wonderful experience. And I have so many great memories of that time and that part of the world. It's it's pretty awesome.
Now, considering from where you are now, where you're calling, one of few play-by-play callers in the country in the AFL space for women, when did the dream sort of come about to say, well, I want to get into sports journalism and I want to take this footy thing a little bit more seriously?
I think from a really early age, I think it was because I get asked this question a lot. How did you want to become a broadcaster? And sort of think, well, the passion for footy, like I said, was just kind of ingrained in me from the moment I was born. And And I think, I always grew up wanting to be a broadcaster because when I was younger and the Suns weren't in existence and Brisbane Lions were playing a home game every other week. So we watched a lot of the AFL competition on TV and listened to it on the radio. And so I grew up with the voices of Bruce McAvaney and Dennis Cometti, and I just thought they had the best job in the world. And growing up in Queensland, when you see the grand finals played at the MCG in Melbourne was just kind of like this fantasy land. It was like Disneyland to me. It was this place that just was so far away. And so I think I just thought, like, one day, I want to be there and I want to do this and be a part of those big moments at, places like the MCG. So I think that's where it was all born. And then I think a part of me also was, women's footy didn't exist. So I thought, well, if I can't be a footy player, I want the next best thing. That's to sit in the stands or sit in the commentary box and commentate. So yeah, it was the seed was planted from a very young age, and I'm grateful that I get to live out a genuine childhood dream.
I've spoken to a lot of people that I've worked with over the journey, who coincidentally we shared the same epiphany when we were at the age of 9. I've spoken to a lot of journalists who, like me, as soon as we hit 9, we were watching on TV, we were reading it through the papers, we were listening on the radio, we were just consumed, and it was just like, okay, this is it. You mentioned female football wasn't around. You also had the other obstacle where you envisioned sitting in the stands calling the game, but of course there was no representation of women in the call space as well. Did that either be a deterrent or give you that extra hunger to go, you know what, this is a space that I'm going to really push hard and be competitive and try and crack into pretty early?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think, when I was growing up and wanting to be a journalist and a broadcaster, when you're young, you don't quite think of those things because you're young and you don't really understand how the world works and you don't quite understand how difficult it is. You just have a dream and you just want to watch footy, and it's as simple as that, really. So but when I was growing up, there were some females in the footy space, Christy Malthouse, Tiffany Cherry. In those days, I thought Tiffany Cherry had the best job in the world. In the very first the first iteration of Fox Footy, one of my favorite TV shows was White Line Fever. So Clinton,
it was magnificent.
And Clinton Grimes was, somebody else I really idolized as well. I thought it was fantastic. And Tiffany Cherry was on that show reading the news. And I remember I watched every episode with my dad on the couch. And so I just thought, yeah, like that they had, again, the best jobs in the world. And so, I was lucky that, and, Caroline Wilson obviously has been around for a very long time. So fortunate that there were women in the industry that I could look up to. As I got older through my teens and started to think, there is no play-by-play caller at that stage. We had, boundaries and journalists and things like that. And so in the back of my mind, I did think, well, I might have to be the first. And then started to think, will it actually happen? Can it actually happen? So I guess when I was sort of a teenager, I started to have those, thoughts of maybe this just can't happen, and those sorts of things. And that's where, as we know, when Kelly Underwood obviously did it for the first time, I was a uni student, eating 2-minute noodles and in a very small apartment in Melbourne at the time, when I started my degree, when I watched her on TV for the first time, and I had like a TV that was a cube. That's how
of course, yes.
Long before it was nowhere near a flat screen, let me tell you.
It was still black and was it black and white at the time, or you danced to color?
I'm not that old, but yeah, it was a very, very small TV, and I was just in awe, and that's how powerful and how impactful what Kelly has achieved and other women in the industry is that, when I saw her do it, it instantly removed any doubt in my mind that it was possible, because I thought to myself, if she can do it, so can I. And so that meant that, no matter what, I was never going to give up. And, every time I've had a bad day over the next sort of, 14, 15 years, whatever we're up to now, I just kept thinking, if she can do it, so can I. And so that's how massive her achievement and her being a trailblazer was, because it just meant that women like me were never going to give up after that. So yeah, that's how big it is.
Question I have in that space though, were there other women perhaps in the past that maybe you've spoken to over the journey that had thought about it but saw the obstacle was very much like Mount Everest and decided to go on another path? Was it just a matter of persistence that maybe changed the game a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, I can't recall any specific conversations with anyone around that, but I do have conversations with, you know, a lot of women in the industry about how difficult it is, and have, you know, maybe wanted to go down one particular path, but, you know, have ended up doing a different job in the industry just because, you know, it kind of got, difficult, or there are obstacles in the way and things like that. So, yeah, I think it definitely, you know, is difficult for a lot of us to, you know, either not kind of stick to something, but yeah, to be able to go after what we want, because that sometimes there are just so many roadblocks in the way, and there still are. It's not easy to kind of to break into the industry, but you know, there are certain roles that are harder to get into than others, and all of that.
So you land up in Darwin, you're doing journalism, you're involved in footy up there. How are you settling in up there, and how does your love of footy start to grow in the NT?
I loved it. I was, you know, like I said before, it was such a magical time, and I was also young, and I just got my first job in the industry, and so it was just really great to be able to say, my name is Jess and I'm a sports journalist. Like it was really great. Like it meant a lot, and it was probably the first place in my life where I felt like I truly belonged. You know, growing up in Brisbane, as we know, it's a rugby dominated state. So you're kind of always like the odd one out really at school. Like most people go, you know, support rugby league, and but moving to Darwin, where football is just such an intrinsic part of culture and community up there, and everybody loves it. They live and breathe it. I've found my people. This is just where I belong. It's and so it made me love the game even more, and yeah, so it was a really, like I said, a really great time of my life, and definitely, like I said, made me love the game even more, made me love being a journalist and a broadcaster even more. I honestly, like, sometimes I think I could so stay there the rest of my life. It was the best. And I was also in the early 20s and just, you know, having a great time. So but loved it up there.
I've spent a fair bit of time talking with Shannon Byrne, who is one of the pioneers as well, coming through AW and heading up there. And in my many conversations with her, she just couldn't express enough about how much she loved it up there. It just seems so relaxing, and but you can easily indulge in the game a lot more than where you could anywhere else, because there's probably not as much distraction, I guess, from the game.
Yeah, and it's, you know, community footy up there dominates. So it's, you know, everybody has the local team that they go for, and like I said, I really loved you know, learning about all the family history with all the different clubs, and all of that, and the pride that they have playing for their local club and following in the footsteps of their family members was really special. So so you kind of, you know, you get immersed in that, and you sort of you understand how much it means to people up there to play footy, but more specifically play local footy, which, you know, as we know, is the heartbeat of our game, is at the grassroots level. And so it was just fantastic to be fully immersed in that. And I was lucky enough to travel all around the Northern Territory in my job. And so it was really great.
You're a person that is very, very strong, very resilient, and very eager to grow and expand. When you were up there, did you sort of look at the media landscape and thought, how could I grow this? How could I make it bigger? How could I make it better? And by that stage, that was your third state that you lived in as well. Did you sort of harbor any ambitions on where you'd like to at the time take the role to sort of grow the profile of the competition that might draw some extra attention down south?
I think definitely there's an element of when you live kind of in a place like Brisbane that may be a non-traditional state, or a place like Darwin that may not be, known really to the rest of the country, or have the eyeballs watching the competition. There certainly is an element that you're like, I have an opportunity here as a journalist and a storyteller to try and tell these stories and promote the game, promote the competition. So certainly there is a bit of that, and I think again, growing up in Brisbane and knowing how hard it is to have people understand it and follow the game, certainly understood that when I moved to Darwin. And so I really took a lot of pride in the stories and my role that I had at the NT News in promoting those stories and the people in the Northern Territory.
Did you do any commentary or any video stuff while you're up there, or was it strictly just print?
So when I moved up there, I actually moved up to Darwin. I didn't have a job.
Oh, okay.
So I knew a couple of people that were living in Darwin at the time. I just finished my degree, and my partner at the time wanted to go up there and play footy. So we thought, well, we'll go up there and give it a go. And like I said, I knew a couple of people, and they said they'd help me, get in touch with other people in the industry, and maybe some work will come about. So kind of went up there and took a risk, and like I said, didn't have a job. And so I ended up being introduced to a great woman, Karina Gray, who then introduced me to a great man, Charlie King, who I ended up doing some work experience for at the ABC. And then after a few weeks, he gave me an opportunity to be a boundary writer for ABC TV's coverage of the NTFL season. They had the rights at the time. So within a few weeks, I was so lucky that I got my first gig in broadcasting. And I remember my first game being on the boundary, and I was just sweating. You wouldn't believe. I looked a mess.
Was that nerves, or was that just the heat as well?
It was probably a combination of everything, but I remember being super nervous, but it was great. And Charlie King has just been, he's such a wonderful human. I could speak about him forever. But yeah, he gave me an opportunity, and it was great fun. And then kind of did that for a few weeks, and then just right place at the right time. A job came up at the NT News and as a sports reporter, and I applied and somehow got it. And that was kind of the beginning of that journey. And then it just all kind of went from there.
I'd imagine some of your boundary work at that stage, that would have looked at that favorably, because you already started to build the connections, you started to build that profile that would have already been beneficial for the NT News anyway. Yeah,
I think so. That's kind of what the industry is about. Networking and building relationships is massive. So if you can have that sort of at the forefront, you'll go a long way.
So if you finish up at the NT, what happens there, and where do you relocate after that?
So I was there for 5 years and worked at the NT News, and then had some freelance opportunities on the side. So did some work for ABC. I hosted my own sports radio show on Territory FM for a couple of years, and then did some freelance work working for Southern Cross TV, just a bit of presenting and reporting on local footy. And so after about 5 years, I thought, well, I feel like I've got some experience now in print, TV, and radio, and wanted to take the next step in my commentary. And so that's when I moved back to Brisbane, and started working for the AFL, where I was media and communications manager for the NEFL competition. And then, I pretty soon after I moved back to Brisbane, I met Quentin Hull at the ABC. And said, I want to be a play-by-play. How do I make this happen? I'd done a little bit of it in the NT, but back in those days, again, I'm not that old, but technology has come a long way, and so it's 10 to 15 years. So I'm old in technology years. But live streaming and things like that were in its infancy, and so there was a bit of opportunity to kind of jump in and commentate local footy, but these days there's so much more opportunity. So kind of done it a bit in NT, but wanted to make the move to Brisbane, try and take the next step, and try and break into the AFL level. And so met Quentin Hull and pretty early on, and said, hey, I want to be a commentator. And he said, right, well, send me in a tape and come into the ABC studios and I'll have a listen. And he was another one along the way who has been a fantastic mentor for me, and he basically taught me how to call play-by-play. And so we went in there and And then, after a couple of years, I got the opportunity to commentate in the men's AFL competition for the first time while I was commentating locally in the NEFL.
I do have to ask, because it's a bug that a lot of those in the play-by-play space just sometimes it's unexplainable. But why play-by-play? Why not special comments? Why not presenting? Why not boundary? What drew you specifically to play-by-play?
I think it goes back to, again, like I said earlier, growing up and listening to people like Bruce McAvaney and Dennis Cometti. I mean, I just wanted to be them. I don't know.
Yeah.
I just think I just naturally gravitated towards it. I think at the core of what I do is I'm a storyteller.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think there's an element of being a play-by-play where you are telling the story and you're connecting footy fans with some of the best memories of their life. And so having that that responsibility and having that opportunity to be able to enhance a moment and tell a story, I think is what I just have always naturally gravitated towards. So it's a good question. It's something I haven't kind of really thought about.
That's a good answer though, because
Yeah.
I think I've found throughout my calling career, as you probably found it through yours, you're gonna have your ups and downs and days where you might rock up to the comm box and you're just going through the motions, but as soon as you put the headset on, you're off to the races, and it's just something you inexplicably tap into that you can't experience anywhere else. And so sometimes I feel that there is no real answer to it, but once you put the cans on, all the answers are presented in front of you.
I think so. I think you're right. And some of the best advice I've gotten in my life is, and advice to anyone in general, is find something that puts you in flow state. So, and you'll live your happiest life. And so when I put the headset on and game of footy and you just go and you commentate, I lose all sense of time and where I am because I'm in flow state. And it's the happiest time of my life when I've got the headset on and I'm commentating a game of footy. And so I think it's an element of that too, that it is pure joy and you have to chase after that. And so I think that's another element of why I love it so much, is that it just puts me in flow state and off I go and I'm just in another world and having fun.
I don't know about you, but sometimes when I've called over the journey in any sport, the days where I just feel ordinary, feel flat, I'm having a rough day, I'm going through a rough period, those are the days where I end up calling the best, because as soon as I put the cans on, I completely shed that skin of what it was like before I put them on, and you are in that flow state. I find that there's that big gap between you feeling at your worst and you feeling at your best. And sometimes that actually brings the best out of me. I don't know whether you've had some off days where, something's happened at home or you're just not feeling confident, but as soon as you put the cans on, all of a sudden a game of footy breaks out and you end up calling a pretty good game of footy.
Yeah, football has an amazing ability to turn around your day. I think so. I mean, I guess if your team loses, that's probably only going to add maybe to your troubles. But yeah, as a commentator, you're absolutely right. It can. I don't know though if it makes me commentate better. Yeah, I'll have to kind of, keep track of that, I think, if I have a bad day, and then kind of review it afterwards and go, was it because I had a bad day? But definitely as a way, I will forget everything that ever, has given me issues throughout the day. It'll turn around my mood. It'll turn around my outlook on everything going to work. So and I'm lucky too. I get to work with some really fantastic people. So you get to go to work and pardon me, and hang out with your mates and have a good time. So like I said before, it's the best part of my day.
So something I resonate that you've said that I can relate to personally as well is, I'm like you, I love storytelling. But storytelling at times can become a detriment to my level of preparation with how I get ready for a game of football. I find that I could produce all the stats and pages and pages of stuff that a lot of the best callers in the country do. But at the end of the day, with that storytelling drive comes over the top of you, you discard the notes and you just become so more immersed in telling the story of the game. Is that something that you can sort of relate to, or do you still prepare quite thoroughly with your notes that might be able to come in handy, or do you let the storytelling dictate how you call the game a bit more?
Look, I think it's a bit of both, because, sometimes when it comes to storytelling, the story you're trying to tell could be a personal element of that player. It could be something that is stats related. It could be the first time someone's done something, or it could be Buddy Franklin kicking his 1,000th goal is a classic example of that. That's a stat.
Yeah, that's true.
And it was one of the biggest moments that we'll ever see in our lives. So, there is, there is the kind of classic thing everyone says, that you prepare thoroughly and you might use 10% of it.
Exactly. And so that's generous too. Sometimes use 5% or 2%.
That's absolutely true. But, you will call your best when you can assess that moment, and know whether, what is the story. And like I said, that could be anything from what's happened in that game, what's happened in their career. It could be someone kicking a goal in their final game. So your ability to know what that story is and be able to tell that story is where you get the gold, and where you become a great caller.
Now, we'll wind it back to the NEAFL, because now the NEAFL is no longer around anymore. For those who don't know what the NEAFL was, it encompassed teams across New South Wales and Queensland. It disbanded, I think, was it 2018, 2019. You were such a big role in that. And for people like me moving to Queensland, learning a little bit about the calling space, the environment, everyone I spoke to was like, Jess Webster was the pioneer of bringing calling and the profile of the competition, and even AFL Queensland, up to a high level. Was that really important to you to sort of get that sort of drive and generate that profile and also grow yourself in the process?
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, thank you for those kind words. It was a great job. I'm probably understating it. It was probably the best job that I ever had. I loved it so much. And when it started, it was teams from Queensland, New South Wales, ACT, and the Northern Territory. Started in 2011. And so my early years as a journalist in the Northern Territory, NT Thunder played in the NEAFL. So I used to commentate and report on their games. And then when I moved back to Brisbane in about late 2014, is when I jumped in and ran the media and comms for the NEAFL, and then it was disbanded during COVID in 2020. Sorry to correct you, but if anyone knows me, I know the NEAFL so much, and anyway, so I'm gonna absolutely cop flack for that. But yeah, to answer your question, like we spoke about before, growing up in Brisbane and it being a rugby dominated state, and loving the game of Aussie rules so much, and you want more and more people to know about it. You want people to love it as much as you do. So that definitely did drive me, was growing the profile of the game in the Northern States. And that was pretty much the reason why the NEAFL existed, was to grow the game in the Northern States, to improve the talent pathways, to get more people playing the game and involved in the game. And so, like I said, I absolutely loved it. I threw everything at it. And yeah, it was the best job I ever had, I think.
Yeah, I could sense it would have been exhausting too, because there was so much that you could do and so little time in the day to be able to do it all. And that's a testament to what you've been able to achieve and chasing that dragon and really growing the profile. But it would have been a pretty taxing period as well, I'd imagine.
Oh, definitely. And we were, operating on a very small budget as well. There was only a few of us, running the league. But what I loved about the NEAFL and some of the best memories I have is that it wasn't just the people working for the NEAFL that had so much passion for it. It was everyone involved from the clubs, all the staff, all the players who really bought into what we were trying to achieve. And it was tough, obviously we had the 4 AFL clubs in there, and, competitive balance was a big issue that we faced over the years. And, but yeah, everybody wanted to achieve the same goal, which was, like I said, to grow the game, to grow the competition to a great standard. And and have it be, you know, on par with the VFL and the SANFL and the WAFL, and in terms of that standard, and also trying to get kids drafted. So draft night was huge for us. We would just sit around and just, you know, cheer and celebrate every time we had a local player drafted, because we felt like, you know, that was kind of the end product of all the work that we were putting in. So it was awesome to see so many players get their opportunity in the big leagues. And yeah, but that's probably what I think I'm proud of the most, is that we really built a community, and yeah, did our best to achieve the outcomes that we had set in mind.
I could say from a personal perspective, I relate a lot to what you're saying come draft night. I mean, we're looking at, you know, in less than 2 weeks' time, the Gold Coast are going to have 3 players that are going to be drafted. And then we've got another one, Leo Lombard, that'll be coming up the next year. As someone, and again, I'm probably, you know, being involved in handballing the baton around after Jess Webster has gone south. But I feel the same thing. I look at the 3 guys that are getting drafted. I look at Leo Lombard, who'll go next year. I've called those guys through the QAFL senior men's competition and the VFL. And for me, the biggest thrill, even more so than seeing Essendon win a game of footy, or maybe even with Essendon winning a final after 50,000 days, is seeing these kids get drafted, because you could say, well, look, I called them, and they were I was there when they really started to build their football career. Were there any players that you sort of watched that you called a fair bit of through the NEAFL, through Clubland, and they got drafted, that you had that sort of sentimentality for when they did get picked up by the AFL?
Oh, absolutely. And you're right. I don't know exactly why that's the case, but when you see a kid coming through, and like you said, there's so much pride that I have that, you know, either commentated or watched them play in the NEAFL and see them, you know, go on to bigger and better things. And there are so many players. If I had to try, off the players like Eric Hipwood, I watched him play when he was, you know, in the Lions Academy, when, you know, before he got picked up. And also the other thing with the NEAFL is that when that competition started was around the same time that all the Northern Academies started. So yeah, that was obviously, then they had a, you know, competition to play in. So probably one game that stands out for me, 2014 NEAFL Grand Final, one of the most iconic Grand Finals you've ever seen in your life. Aspley taking on Sydney up in at Aspley's home ground. Aspley won with a kick after the siren. It was ridiculous. It was awesome. In that Sydney Swans team, they had, I think, 16 AFL listed players, which was the limit. A future Brownlow medalist called Tom Mitchell was running around and won the best on ground medal. Sydney's top-ups, a couple of kids called Isaac Heaney and Callum Mills were playing as top-ups.
Wow.
So, yeah, and before they got drafted. So Isaac Heaney went that year and Callum Mills was only 16. So I think he was picked up the next year off memory. So yeah, they're running around as top-ups wearing jumper number 56 or whatever it was. So a lot of, there's a lot of players that came through the state league pathways and went on to bigger and better things. So yeah, so many memories. And it's still kind of like you watch them in the AFL and you just think, wow, I can't believe that, you know, I once saw them play when they were 16, 17.
Do you sort of still follow them a little bit too? Now with your calling career that has taken off do you sort of gear yourself up for that? And look, I'll use one example. I'm wearing a Riddle Umpires top for those who are. That was where I sort of grew up in Central Victoria. One of the first grand finals I umpired was Zach Guthrie, who played with Sunbury Lions under 12s. He was best on ground, in my opinion, in the losing team. I couldn't give it to him because his team got comprehensively beaten. First AFL game that I called, it was his 50th game. And for me, personally, because I'd followed his career once he got drafted, because I umpired him that one game, I was more excited about calling his 50th game than I was making my AFL debut. Was there any sort of players like that where you're like, I can't wait to call them, and you sort of gear yourself up for that, bigger than the game itself?
Oh, definitely. Yeah, I think so. Probably one that I think, again, just kind of off the top of my head, because there've been so many, but Oscar Baker. So he came through Brisbane and through Astley Footy Club, was picked up as a mature age draftee. And I didn't recall him when he played for Melbourne, but this year when he crossed to the Western Bulldogs. And again, I don't know, it was round 3 or 4. It was just a random round.
Yep.
It wasn't his milestone of any kind, but it was the first time that I got to commentate Oscar Baker playing in the AFL.
Oh.
And so just knowing that, again, you know, comes from my local club. He was coached by my brother and played in the NEFL and all those sorts of things. And I know a bit about his backstory and how hard he had to work to get his opportunity. You know, it was really special to be able to call him playing at the elite level and see him living out his dream. So there's definitely just a lot of players like that that you see come from, you know, community footy or state league pathways that, holds a special place in your heart, I think, when you're commentating them.
And that's the art of storytelling too. And because you've been involved in football across so many levels, and you get a taste of it from the bottom up, and now you're sitting at the top level. I mean, there's an element of career progression, but I think there's an element of deeper appreciation because you have been there at the ground level, you know, putting the lines around the ground, so to speak, particularly in the media space. I guess you have that appreciation for it, much like what the players have done with that particular journey.
Yeah, I think so. Like I said, I'm really, really lucky to be able to do what I do, and I'm proud to have, I guess, got my foundation at community and state league level, because I think it makes me appreciate where I am a whole lot more. So I'm really, like I said, thankful and grateful for all the experiences that I've had, you know, in Darwin and Brisbane, now here in Melbourne. And yeah, I absolutely love what I do, and just being a part of this great game at all levels. And yeah, it means a lot to me.
Two key things I want to touch on. You get the call up. You're making your AFL debut on radio. What's that like? What's the week like leading up to that? And what was the reaction like when you got the phone call, the text, or however it sort of come through? And then what was it like on game day for you when you got that call to do your first radio game?
Yeah, so I remember the phone call. Just absolutely couldn't believe it. I think a few weeks prior to that, or earlier in the season, it was Quentin Hull who sort of flagged it and said, "Hey, like, you know, keep going, keep commentating in the NEFL and keep practicing, because there might be an opportunity for you during the season." And I'm like, "No, there won't."
You've heard that before.
No, like, that's absolutely not going to be the case. As much as I would love to, and it's an absolute dream, you know, I'll believe it when I see it, kind of.
Exactly.
You just don't think. You know, or almost kind of, there's probably a part of you that doesn't want to believe it because you want it so much. And then when I did get the phone call saying, "Yep, you're in," I was in shock. It was a pretty quick phone call, and then I immediately called my brother Daniel. And I got the phone call when I was in the car park at Chermside Shopping Centre on my way to, I don't know, shop for something. And yeah, called Daniel. So I was in the car park and I was just fighting back tears.
Oh.
And I don't think I fought them back very well. I think, I started crying. But that was, again, a pretty quick phone call, because I just would have absolutely lost it in the car park. And yeah, so I remember that. And then actually on game day, I had to work because we had a NEFL game somewhere in Brisbane. I think it was at Aspley. So I had to like quickly kind of duck in and you know, because I'm still wearing the media and comms hat. So I had to make Friday night game at Carrara. It was Gold Coast Suns versus Geelong. And so quickly stopped in a NEFL game and then went down the highway. But one of the cool things I remember about that day was I got a phone call from Kelly Underwood, who left me a voicemail, and I had met her years earlier, actually, at a press conference in Darwin, of all places. And we had sort of crossed paths a couple of times in the sort of 6 or 7 years after that. And we did work on a game together for ABC when she was calling and I was on the boundary. And so, she called me, she left a voicemail to wish me good luck and give me some advice as well. And that was awesome, just for her to take some time out of her day and reach out to me, and knowing that it was my debut. And then I obviously went down the highway. I kind of don't remember a lot about the lead up, probably because I was just so nervous. But I do remember being absolutely petrified, so nervous, like you wouldn't believe. And I just kept telling myself, it's okay, you're not going to die, everything's going to be fine. And then when I got to the game and was telling myself, well, you can't go home, like you've got to do this, you're here now, you just got to go for it. And yeah, I just remember being really nervous, but I called alongside Michael Price, who I've known for a million years, commentated a lot of NEAFL games together and AFL games together. And he was amazing. He's just a great man and has been always so supportive. And he always makes me really calm in the commentary box. And yeah, really got behind me. And yeah, we had lots of fun. And yeah, it was just it was crazy. I couldn't believe I was there. I couldn't believe that it was actually happening.
I do have an extended question on top of that. Break down your first goal, because I know you've called many goals since, but do you remember that first goal that you called and what happened?
I don't remember it.
No, Jess, what are you doing to me?
I don't remember. Yeah, it was, I mean, to be fair, it was 8 years ago now. So
fair enough, yeah.
But I'm sure there's a tape out there. So although in saying that, I think I listened back to some of that tape, but it was horrendous. I don't want to listen.
Yeah. Which is a testament of your improvement too, isn't it?
Oh, yeah, well, I hope so. But yeah, no, I don't actually. I mean, probably might have just been like a set shot. If I can't remember it, it might have just been, I don't know. Yeah. Yeah. Sorry, I can't help it.
I know. I'm a storyteller in that. I called my first game. Ironically, also the same game. The same fixture. It was Gold Coast and Geelong, and I still tell people that I knew I finally landed when Geelong won the hit out of the centre, comes out and out of Patrick Dangerfield, kicks the ball up towards half forward. Jeremy Cameron Mark swings around on his left foot and kicks a goal. And I'm like, I tell people, if I could ask for a better goal, that for me, that was my ideal goal. That's why I've never forgotten it, because it's Dangerfield to Cameron, and in typical classy fashion. So yeah. You never forget your first. So anyway, well,
yeah, you can.
I might in 6 years' time.
I'll have to, but you've made me think. I might have to go back and try and find that tape and have a listen. So next time I get asked that question, I can actually answer it. So.
All right, and the second one there, we got TV. So you're with Fox Footy. You've been doing a lot of wonderful things there. How does that happen? What's the phone call like, and what's the feeling like in the lead up to that first game?
Yeah, so I just moved to Melbourne. So AFLW competition obviously started in 2017, and so I, tried to, send some emails and phone calls, try and get a gig. And so 2017 it was a no, 2018 it was a no, 2019 it was a no, and then I moved to Melbourne and met some people in person, and again sort of tried again, and then this is for the 2020 season, and didn't quite hear anything. And then one day I was actually in the car on the way to Colac. I was working for the AFL media team at the time, and I was on my way to be media manager for a preseason game out there in Colac. And so I was on the drive on the highway, and got a text message and pulled over because I saw it was a producer from Fox, and pulled over, and it was, can you do boundary this weekend for an AFLW game? And I just lost it. I can't believe this, because I'd had a bad day, and just having everything turn around was incredible. So went to Colac, did my thing, and then on the way home again, called Daniel. He's always my first phone and said I'm making my debut this weekend, and on the boundary. And what was crazy about that day was it was a Sunday. It was at Whitten Oval. And we kind of heard of this virus thing that was kind of going around at the time, but we thought, we're just Australia. It's,
not a big deal.
not a big deal. So I did boundary on the Sunday. On the Monday was when the pandemic was declared.
Oh.
And everything changed because we were stood down from the AFL. Obviously, that was when the AFLW competition went straight to finals. Because it was like round 7 at the time, went straight to finals. Channel 7 had the rights, so there was no more work for Fox. I ended up losing my job at the AFL, and that was the last game I commentated for the rest of the year. So I didn't commentate a game for 12 months because just, lost all those opportunities, and obviously it was chaos. So it was crazy to go from such a high and then literally the next day have everything taken away from you. It was yeah, it's hard to describe. And so that was me for the next 12 months. I didn't work after that. It was wild.
Look, I should have sent you a text message going, hey, if you can sneak over the border, we're business as usual here at AFL Queensland.
I tried. Well, I mean, that was the really devastating thing about 2020 was, I had flights booked and then they'd shut the borders. And so I got stuck in Melbourne. And then obviously the AFL season moved to Brisbane. And that was honestly one of the hardest times of my life. I stopped watching football for the first time in my life because it was so devastating to be stuck in Melbourne, not be home, but then have football being played at home and not being there. It was really difficult, but we all got through and we're here now. So yeah, it's all good now.